Welcome to this month's edition of Small Group. Today's topic is Pentecost. And you're probably looking at the screen and saying, okay, he's flipped his lid. Well, actually, we're going to talk about each one of these things in a different way, and you're going to see how we wrap it all together to celebrate and understand better Pentecost. Yes, that is Snowman. We'll call him Frosty, because we like Frosty. And we have a smiley face sticking his tongue out. And we have fire. All three have a special purpose or a special connection to Pentecost, and we'll go through and see how they all wrap together, and you'll see that I'm not that crazy. Well, for the most part, I'm not that crazy. Alright, Pentecost. It's the second, especially in the earlier church, it's the second most important date in the Christian faith. Most important, obviously, being Easter that we just finished. Then was actually celebrated specifically 50 days after Passover, and that was actually already being a date that was celebrated by the Jewish community because of successful harvest. Now, if we think about this and then think about our own country's history, when did we do something very similar? Yes, Thanksgiving. The Indians had the Thanksgiving feast because of a successful harvest. They were thankful. Again, Thanksgiving coming from that. And here's where we have the same thing that happened because of a good harvest. 50 days after Passover in the harvest season, they celebrated and gave thanks for having a successful harvest. Well, this coincidentally coincided with Pentecost as the church got started. It was this celebration, and it was actually two celebrations in one. It was the celebration of the ascension of Jesus into heaven after he rose from the dead, and he was among his disciples after he was risen from the dead. And then it was also the descending of the Holy Spirit. As time went on, these two events kind of got separated into two individual events, where we had Jesus ascending into heaven, and then later the Holy Spirit coming to the disciples. So as time went on, the two events kind of separated a little bit in time. But you can see through Bible text where one actually refers to the coming of the other. Alright, baptism and Pentecost. Okay, how did they work together? Well, during the season of Pentecost seems to be a very popular time for baptisms. Also, confirmations, having new members come into the church. This is because it's like a new beginning. You're taking Jesus and believing in Jesus and having him come into your heart. It's a new baby being christened or being baptized and coming into the church anew, and obviously a new member. Somebody from the outside coming and becoming part of the church family. So Pentecost is a time of beginnings, and we'll get into that in a little bit, but it's a time of beginnings which fits really well with baptism, the beginning of a new life, confirmations when people accept Jesus into their Lord and they come of the age of understanding and they want to change their lives and ask the Lord into their heart, and also with new members, bringing new members into the church and exposing them, if they haven't been already, or welcoming them into our family as a new beginning and a new member. Alright, now what was Frosty's favorite words? Happy birthday! Just as soon as he put that hat on, those were his first words. And that's because he is one smart snowman. Why? Because Pentecost is the church's birthday. This is where the church got started. And we'll discuss their early beginnings, but this is truly where the disciples got started and went out and started preaching to the world about the glory of God and Jesus being on earth and being among them and the good news. Pentecost was the birthday of the church. In fact, a lot of times the pastoral on Pentecost Sunday will say, Happy birthday, or it's birthday time, or we don't usually sing happy birthday, but we celebrate the birth of the church, the birth of the Christian church after Jesus ascended into heaven. So this is thought of as a renewing time, again, going back to having baptisms, confirmations, and new members coming into church, this seems to be the season for that. And again, not that you can't have that happen other times of the year, but it goes with the season. It goes with the beginning of the church, the creation of the church, the starting anew from after when Jesus had left us. Alright, tongues of fire. See where we're getting this? We had the snowman, now we're going to talk about tongues, and we had fire. In Luke chapter 24:48, Jesus tells his disciples as he's ascending into heaven, and again, this is where the ascension comes into the beginning of where the Holy Spirit descended upon them, to go to the city and stay there until what his Father had promised has come to them. Where the Holy Spirit, the gift of the Holy Spirit, comes to them and fills them. In Acts 2, going again after Jesus arises into heaven, those 50 days after Passover, Acts 2, the Holy Spirit comes. And they say it came like a violent wind. And the appearance of tongues of fire appeared to be above all the disciples' heads. This even continues with what happens next, and they began to speak in different languages to one another, and they understood each other. This was a gift that the Holy Spirit came into them. They were reborn, refreshed. They were given these abilities, this power to be able to speak in tongues, to be able to heal. The Holy Spirit's power came into them from God, and they were able to now be prepared to go into the world and start to spread the good news. Jesus had trained them all this time, showed them what his Father wanted him to do, and then he was able to pass that along, and with the help of the Holy Spirit coming into them, they were able to have all these abilities and these gifts that God had given them. And if we think about it, we have some gifts too. We might not have tongues of fire over our heads, and we might not be speaking in different languages, ¿Cómo estás? Muy bien. Y tú, y kannst sprechen Sie Deutsch? And that's about the extent of all the languages I got. We might not do that. However, we have abilities that we can use to spread God's word. Alright, fire triangle tetrahedron. In doing research for tonight, there is an article by Marcia McPhee. She had talked about the correlation of fire and the Pentecost season, and also spoke about her experiences with fire and how she was very aware of it because she lived on a mountain and they had wildfires from time to time, and she was very aware of that. So she actually correlated that to how a fire works and how the Holy Spirit works, and wrapped it into the Pentecost season in an article she wrote. So we start out to have a fire, we have to have a few things. We have to have heat. If we don't have heat, you're not going to have fire. You got to get a material hot enough to be able to burn. This could be thought of as God's spark, the spark that he gave us, that the Holy Spirit in the disciples' case, or somebody coming to us and telling us about Jesus for the first time and putting that spark into us and saying, what's this all about? Getting that fire started, getting that little ember hot enough for us to continue to feed it. But heat isn't enough. We also need a fuel, something for it to burn. We can get heat all we want, but if we don't have something to burn, to continue the burning, then we're kind of lost. The fire goes out. So our spirit could be looked at. Our drive, our desires, our passion could be the fuel, or our spirit, to continue that fire burning. However, that isn't enough. We also need oxygen. Well, oxygen supports the combustion process. That could be looked at as our church family, whether it be our true family members or it be just members of the congregation that are there to support us, that carry us when we're having bad times, and we need a little extra pick-me-up. They can be there. They could be that oxygen, help fan that fire and keep that fire going. It could also be looked at as a pastor, as a mentor, as somebody that continually gives you encouragement or helps you to learn even more about the church and keeps that fire going with the fuel of your spirit and God's spark that initiated it. Now there is one other thing. They call it a tetrahedron because it's nothing more than a three-sided pyramid. You have the three sides, and then you have the bottom, and that's the chain reaction. Something that continually gets that fire to continue and not stop. It allows the heat to keep on getting hotter because it's burning the fuel and it has enough oxygen. Unless that chain is broken, or it could be a chemical that keeps the chain going to continue to heat and keep the fuel going, or radiate that heat elsewhere to spread the fire. Alright, so that's your fire science. Now how does that work into Pentecost and the whole spirit of this? And that's being contagious. Being contagious and spreading the enthusiasm, spreading God's loves to others. We're contagious. If we have all the rest of that, the heat, the fuel, the oxygen, and that's strong, we can be contagious to others. They can look at us, our lives, our actions, and say, hey, look at them. They really got it together. Even though we don't always have it sometimes. They got it together. I wonder what their secret is. Why are they like the way they are? And then again, we can change their lives by telling them about God and spreading His Word. In the article that Ms. McPhee wrote, she took those and said some of those fires or things that fan the fire or continue the fire going are compassion, hospitality, compassion again, really compassionate, and justice. And there's a myriad of other words you could throw in there that could correlate with these points that keep that fire, keep that desire, keep that energy going. Now, God gave them the gifts to be able to heal, to be able to speak. He gives us gifts too. The Holy Spirit gave those disciples incredible gifts, but God also gives us gifts as well. They might not be as elaborate as being able to speak all kinds of different languages, or maybe not to preach, or maybe not to even sing. That's definitely my boat. But there's so many other gifts that He gives us. Even if you think they're minuscule or you don't have any gifts, you have a gift that He has given you that you can use to spread His Word. So go out. Use those gifts that God has given you. Even if it's something like writing a get well card, or writing a thank you, or hope you're feeling better, or you just are great with people and you give them a pick-me-up when they really need it. Those things are gifts. Not everybody can do these things. So think about it. Think about some of the gifts you have and the ones that God has given you and how you can use them to glorify His name. Alright, these are the resources we use for tonight. Bible Gateway, just the Bible resource, nothing more, Bible Online. And then the resource from Ms. McPhee about Pentecost and the time of season. We went over it with Chuck Knows Church. And we'll have another topic next month. I believe it's early in April. And we will see you again then. Alright, thanks a lot, and good night.